What do we learn about the character of David after his battle with the Amalekites? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 1 Samuel on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing 1 Samuel chapter 30, verses 21 to 31. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 1 Samuel 30, verse 21. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 1 Samuel chapter 30, beginning of verse 21. Now David came to the 200 men who had been so weary that they could not follow David, whom they also had made to stay at the brook Besor. So they went out to meet David and to meet the people who were with him. And when David came near the people, he greeted them. Then all the wicked and worthless men of those who went with David answered and said, "Because they did not go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we have recovered, except for every man's wife and children, that they may lead them away and depart." But David said, "My brethren, you shall not do so with what the Lord has given us, who has preserved us and delivered into our hand the troop that came against us. For who will heed you in this matter? But as his part is who goes down to the battle, so shall his part be who stays by the supplies. They shall share alike." So it was from that day forward he made it a statute and an ordinance for Israel to this day. Now when David came to Ziklag, he sent some of the spoil to the elders of Judah, to his friends, saying, "Here is a present for you from the spoil of the enemies of the Lord. To those who were in Bethel, those who were in Ramoth of the south, those who were in Jatir, those who were in Auror, those who were in Siphmoth, those who were in Eshtemoa, those who were in Rachal, those who were in the cities of the Jerahmeelites, those who were in the cities of the Kenites, those who were in Hormah, those who were in Chorashan, those who were in Athak, those who were in Hebron, to all the places where David himself and his men were accustomed to rove." In our last lesson, we had David defeating the Amalekites who had come to Ziklag, burned the city down, taking hostage his men's wives and the people's children, including David's 2 wives. But by the providence of God, David met an Egyptian along the way who had been left for dead by those same Amalekites due to sickness. It was this man who led David to the Amalekites, which resulted in victory for David. It turns out that the Amalekites hadn't harmed any of the women and children, for all was recovered. A rather large spoil of war was also recovered, including animals and seemingly, from what we just read, supplies of silver and gold. When they came back towards Ziklag, they came to Besor, where 200 of David's men stayed behind due to exhaustion. When they arrived, among David's men that went into battle were some wicked and worthless men who vindictively wanted to keep from these men the spoils of war, returning only their women and children, punishment for not coming to battle. That there were wicked and worthless men among David's band of warriors shouldn't surprise us. For one, you will find such in any large group. And two, back in chapter 22, we find that David's men were made up of those aggrieved with Saul and those who were in debt. While some might have legitimate grievances and some might be in debt for innocent reasons, that doesn't necessarily have to be true of all of them. Regardless, though, David wasn't going to have any of it. He tells these men that the spoil that the Lord had given to them would be shared by those who went into battle and those who stayed with the supplies. Notice that David attributed the bounty to the Lord, the one who not only had protected them all these years in the run from Saul, but the one who provided them victory here. And since the Lord did this, David wasn't going to act wickedly. He was going to do just as Moses did after the battle with the Midianites, where in Numbers 31, verses 25 to 27, we read, "Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Count up the plunder that was taken, of man and beast, you and Eleazar the priest, and the chief fathers of the congregation, and divide the plunder into 2 parts, between those who took part in war, and those who went out to battle, and all the congregation." In this, David showed his character as a man of compassion and a man willing to share from the bounty that the Lord provided. He was humble in contrast to Saul's arrogance, and he was a man who was willing to give the Lord the credit for his victories, and because of that, not be greedy with what the Lord had provided. This rule that David made here of sharing the spoils of war with even those who didn't go into battle became an ordinance in Israel that was still being followed in the days when this section of 1 Samuel was being written, which would have been in the days of Rehoboam or even afterwards. The spoils of war didn't just go among David's men, though, for it was large enough that it could be divided even among David's friends in Judah itself. The Bethel mentioned here wouldn't have been the Bethel in Benjamin, but probably the Bethel mentioned in Joshua 19 verse 4 in southern Judah that was given to the tribe of Simeon who lived among Judah. Of the other cities mentioned, these would have all been places in southern Judah where David and his men had traveled through in the days running from Saul, but places that didn't betray him like the Ziphites did. That David was making friends among the people before becoming king would be absolutely necessary if the dynasty in Israel was to change from that of Saul to David. Hence, one of the reasons God sent his prophet to tell David to return to Judah and not remain in Moab. Having completed our look at David for this book, in our next lesson we will return to the battle in the Jezreel Valley between the Philistines and Saul's army and the results that come from it, so we invite you to return for that. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 1 Samuel chapter 31, verses 1 to 13, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.